I'm Ryan Douglas, the teaching pastor here at the 456, and we are going to do a 6-week conversation on money. These are short videos. They're just meant for you to listen to, maybe by yourself, maybe with some friends or family, and to begin to start having some of these discussions. I grew up in church. I've been in church my whole life, and in talking about money, I'm sure there were a lot of ways that we could have gone. I picked 6 topics, 6 for us to discuss. I'm going to start today in Luke 21. I'm going to read you these 4 verses. Super short story, and I just want us to consider them for a moment together before you discuss them amongst yourselves. Luke 21, beginning in verse 1, says, Jesus looked up and saw the rich putting their gifts into the offering box, and he saw the poor widow put in 2 small copper coins, or 2 pennies is the way it was taught to me as a kid. And he said, truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all the rest of them, for they contributed out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty put in all that she had to live on. Now, my whole life, as I sat under teaching and as I heard people talk about giving and heard people talk about finances, I heard them use this story and they would say to the audience, to the church, we need to give like the widow gave. We need to give sacrificially. We need to give until we've given everything we can possibly give. It is used a lot in manipulative kind of ways. It's used a lot, I think, in church building programs to kind of shame people into giving everything, right? But the reality is, if we're going to take this literally, a couple of things. One, it would not be, it's not practical for us to give everything we have to live on. It's not practical, right? 2, Jesus never in this text tells us that this is the model for giving. Jesus never says, now give like she gives. What Jesus is doing is, there are Pharisees, according to Matthew 6, who are giving sizable amounts, and they're doing so with trumpets and with people making pomp and circumstance and making a big deal about, oh, look how much we gave. And people are amazed. They're blown away. I can't believe that guy gave that much money. I can't believe this person gave that much money. And Jesus is saying, well, consider this little widow who put in 2 pennies. And people are going, yeah, that's not very much. And Jesus goes, no, actually, that's all she has to live on. She's more generous than these other guys are. But nowhere in the text does it say that this is the model for giving. Okay? In fact, in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, 2 Corinthians 8 and 9 is the absolute longest text we have in the Bible on what giving should look like. And Paul is addressing the Corinthian church here who have promised a certain gift. We don't know what the amount was, but they've promised a gift for the relief of the saints in Jerusalem. There's a famine in Jerusalem, and they have promised that they're going to raise up this gift and send it to Jerusalem. Now, the time has come for them to collect that gift, and they're way short of what they promised. So they decide, we're not going to send a gift at all. They're embarrassed, so they just decide, we're not going to send any gift. Here's what Paul says, 2 Corinthians 8:12. If the willingness, remember, they've decided we don't want to give a gift, we're embarrassed, we don't have enough. If the willingness is there, the gift is acceptable according to what a person has, not according to what they do not have. I've loved this verse. In other words, if you are willing to give to the Lord, in this case, He is pleased because of the willingness, not the size of the gift. Okay? Verse 13, and this is key. I do not mean that others should be eased and you burdened, but that as a matter of fairness, your abundance at the present time would supply their need, so that their abundance can supply your need and that there can be fairness. Here's what I want you to hear. My whole life, I was read the story, the 4 verses, Luke 21, and told you need to give like the widow. You need to give till it hurts. Paul says that's not the aim. And that wasn't actually Jesus' aim. Jesus does not even make that commentary in Luke 21. But Paul says here in 2 Corinthians 8, he says, I am not asking you to give so that others can be eased and you can be burdened. In other words, if you're sitting at home with $100 for groceries for the month and you're at the end of your rope and you find out somebody else needs groceries, God is not saying, well, you got to give up your $100 so they can eat. He's saying this. Look at what Paul says. I'm asking you that you would give out of your abundance at this present time into their lack, so that at another time, when they have an abundance and you have lack, they can meet your need. Paul says that the requirement, or that the desire of the heart is, 1, to give, right? If the willingness is there, the gift is acceptable. It doesn't matter what the size is. And then 2, out of your abundance. Some of you don't have an abundance. That's okay. That's just not the situation in life you're in. And so you lean on the rest of us who have an abundance, and we as the church take care of you and meet your needs. At some point, there may be a time that we have a lack and you have an abundance, and you're able to meet our needs. And then Paul says this in 2 Corinthians 8:15, as it is written, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. Now, this might be a difficult thing for you to contemplate, but here it is. because maybe you don't understand that context. The one who gathered much had nothing left over. He who gathered little had no lack. It's a reference to Exodus 16 when the people are gathering manna. Manna was the daily bread that God provided for the people of Israel for the 40 years they were in the wilderness. And the manna would show up in the morning, and some people, the Bible says, gathered much, and some people gathered little, and no one had more than they needed or too little, because it was only good for one day. The manna only lasted for one day. So those who gathered too much would find someone who had gathered too little and give them their surplus and pour into them, right? Out of their abundance. Now, the next day, you might be more proficient at gathering, and I might be less proficient at gathering, and I have a lack, and you have an abundance, and so you pour into me. But the point here is, when we think about the money and giving and the kind of givers we should be, one, we should be willing givers. And it doesn't matter the amount. God is pleased with the willingness of the heart. Second, give out of your abundance into the lack that someone else has, knowing that at some point, you'll probably be on the other end of that. And that is what we're called to. That is what our giving should look like. And so I want you to think now about the things that we do as a church where we try to meet people's needs and take care of the needs of the people in our church. That's not anything for people to be embarrassed about when people say, look, I need a little help this month. I need a little help with my bills. There is an abundance in the church, and so we meet that need. And then when that person has an abundance, they'll be able to help meet the needs of somebody else. So this is the beginning of our giving talks, and this is what we want to look at it, what it should look like. The widow, all Jesus is doing there is saying, don't be so impressed by the Pharisees. These guys aren't actually giving as much as you think. That's all that's being said there. In Corinthians, Paul says, look, give out of your abundance into the lack. And when you have a lack one day, somebody else will give out of their abundance into you. Just like when they gathered the manna, the person who gathered much didn't have too much. Why? Because they were able to meet the need of the person who had lack. If you're sitting there going, man, I have too much right now, there's probably lack somewhere in your circle that you're going to be able to be a blessing to. And let that be something you think on as you think about how to give and how to honor God with your giving this week. Have a good day. We'll talk to you soon.